Well, it looks like 2022 is the year of game dev acquisitions. As many people are aware, 2 weeks ago, Microsoft announced that they're acquiring Activision Blizzard, and today we have just learned that Sony is acquiring Bungie. So let's talk about all this. First things first, before I break down, just what we know about the situation and what some of the implications could be, I just really gotta note how funny it is to me that we are now in a timeline where Microsoft has what was basically PlayStation's mascot at one point, Crash Bandicoot, that was originally created by Naughty Dog, who's still with Sony, but the IP went to Activision, which Microsoft now owns. Meanwhile, Sony now owns the company that is responsible for the original creation of Halo, the sort of landmark franchise that helped put Xbox where it is today. What a world. Now, as far as what's going on with this particular acquisition, Bungie did have their own press release kind of saying, hey, we are now joining SIE, and here's the things we're looking forward to doing as part of it. And the announcement itself is mostly just more of a very sort of hype reel of, hey, we're excited to work with them, we're looking forward to our future. There's a couple little bits of information dropped, for instance, their interest in expanding the company size a lot more and how they're going to be actively hiring much more in the future. Really where there's a lot more interesting information about this merger coming from, though, is a pair of interviews that were posted on Game Industry with Jim Ryan, the CEO of PlayStation, and Pete Parsons, the CEO of Bungie. One of the immediate things that these interviews has clarified is, I think, the first question that we're seeing with all of these acquisitions lately: what does this mean for multiplat? And thankfully, PlayStation is quashing this question right away by just clearly stating all of Bungie's properties currently and future games are planned to be maintained as multi-platform releases. They specifically use the frame including rival systems, implying that yes, this does mean Xbox as well. Something that's really interesting too about the answer to that question is that Jim Ryan kind of heavily emphasizes the fact that they are in general looking for PlayStation to be more interested in a multi-platform future. Obviously right now we are seeing a number of major PlayStation IPs that were originally exclusive to Sony consoles, now making their way to PC releases. We got the God of War release, Horizon, we've got more titles coming out on the way that we know we're getting PC releases as well. So it's very interesting to see that they are not only acquiring a company and keeping that multi-platform, but in general, it does seem to be a direction that Sony is interested in doing. In fact, just today, while this is probably a little more due to interference from the MLB, MLB The Show 2022 was announced to be releasing not only on PlayStation and not only on Xbox like 21 did last year, but also on the Switch, which is interesting. The other thing that Ryan touches on in the very brief interview that highlights why they're acquiring Bungie is interest in games as service. PlayStation currently, as far as a lot of their first party goes, has mostly been focused on very kind of controlled single player experiences. One of the things I really love about the platform, but it's no secret that the industry at large has really been focusing on games as service, as well as games that can just have a strong sort of online community aspect to them. And so Ryan points out that working with Bungie, they're really hoping that they can work towards releasing more of these larger titles that are not only multi-platform, but really tap into that particular style of game. And not only release those with Bungie, but maybe learn from the process as well and apply that to other games they will be releasing. Now, as far as Pete Parsons' side of the interview goes, the really big highlight here, I think, is one, touching again on some of the stuff that Ryan talked about, interest in still staying multi-platform, focusing on games as a live service. But the other thing they touch on is overall just the expansion of Bungie and their future plans, which includes obviously continuing to work on Destiny 2, but also working on additional IPs in the future, and also bringing their stuff to other forms of media like television and film, which is something that Sony has become very aggressive with, including the upcoming Uncharted movie. So taking a step back from what I think is going to be a narrative some people are going to spin with in terms of talking about, PlayStation versus Xbox, the thing that is really interesting to me about this is, what does Bungie look like in terms of operating multiple IPs at once? When you look at Bungie's history as a company, they've mostly been focused on really having one major franchise at a time. They had the Marathon trilogy way back when, they had a couple smaller titles that were released after that, and then we of course got the Halo franchise on the earlier Xbox systems, and now Destiny and Destiny 2. So with them, there's always been this very heavy focus of sort of one main franchise that's being focused on, and traditionally those franchises have been an FPS in some form. But if Bungie is looking towards the future of managing multiple IPs and having more games coming out aside from just simply their kind of one major flagship title at a time, which is currently Destiny, what do those other games look like? We're accustomed to seeing what a Bungie shooter looks like, and now we're even more used to seeing what a Bungie live service looks like. So what other genres could they start getting involved in, or what other kind of concepts could they do? Are we going to see more just shooters in general, but experimenting with different specific styles? Are they going to try their hand at other genres, which they have done before in some of their much older titles, but that was also quite a few number of years ago. And on that note too, with the focus on FPS, something that's really interesting about this to me as well is that this brings a first-person shooter title to PlayStation again that is first-party focused. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the plan is for Bungie games to continue to be multi-platform. There are no plans to turn this into a PlayStation-only kind of franchise, but that still does develop a sort of closer relationship. And let's face it, even though these games are coming to multiple platforms, there's going to be those situations where maybe there's a few extra little perks or benefits and reasons to play on a PlayStation system over some of the other options. What's neat about that is the fact that Sony really hasn't focused on the shooter genre in quite some time. The last major release we really had that was a first-party Sony shooter was Killzone Shadowfall at the launch of the PS4, and ever since then, it really hasn't been a priority. Really, first-party PlayStation has much more been focused on the concept of third-person action venture games. They still mess with, shooter mechanics a little bit. Obviously, Naughty Dog games like Uncharted and Last of Us include guns, but it's not really quite the same thing as a focused first-person shooter. And so much like how when Xbox acquired Bethesda, they gained access to a lot of Western RPGs, something that Xbox has been lacking on lately, PlayStation acquiring Bungie is giving them the opportunity to, I think, mess with the FPS genre a lot more. Now, something else I think we need to touch on really quick is the fact that this is the second acquisition announcement in 2022. Obviously, the Activision Blizzard one was a very large announcement from Microsoft at the start of the year, and now with PlayStation announcing that they are acquiring Bungie, Jim Ryan has also made the very specific comment that we should look forward to seeing more acquisition announcements coming from Sony. Now, some people are running wild with this concept right away. I'm already seeing a lot of theories and rumors of, oh, well, Sony should buy Sega next, or they should buy Capcom, which isn't necessarily, I think, the size of all the acquisitions we're going to be seeing. There are a lot of third-party devs out there, and not all of them are necessarily huge, big-name companies with multiple franchises underneath them. In fact, Sony has already been doing some acquisitions in the past, like with Blue Point Games. Am I saying there's no chance there's going to be acquisitions like that? No, not at all. I'm just saying let's not necessarily jump out of our seats and start looking at all the biggest name companies that could now become a first-party studio under either PlayStation or Xbox. Really, I guess my main thought about all that is the acquisition wars are really beginning to start, and it's going to be very interesting to see what the landscape looks like in the next 2 or 3 years as these companies are clearly getting more and more interested in acquiring more studios and seeing how they treat those situations. Again, with Microsoft and Activision, they have stated that Call of Duty games are going to be remaining multi-platform at least for the next couple of years as there are pre-done agreements. Certain Bethesda titles like Starfield we know are already going to be becoming at least Xbox Game Pass platform specific, so PC and Xbox for now. Maybe that changes in the future. And with PlayStation and Bungie, we are seeing that those Bungie titles are going to remain multi-platform. So yeah, if there's more of these that are going to be happening, especially within this year, I'm very curious to see what form it's actually all going to take and how it really does pan out. So that's my thought on all this for what we know right now. Again, just like when I talked about Activision Blizzard, this is all just the tip of the iceberg. We're just kind of working with the initial interviews and announcements. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more implications and news that we're going to learn over the coming months, over the rest of the year, over the next 3 years, probably, to be honest. Let me know what you guys think down below as well. Are you excited about this acquisition? What are you hoping to see come out of it? As always, if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button to let me know and subscribe if you haven't yet. If you didn't like the video, let me know with a dislike. Just because you guys don't see that ratio still, I still can, so I can know if you guys are enjoying this or not. And I will see you guys later.